This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, Jacory Croskey-Merritt.
What's up, everyone? It's Jacory, and in this episode 1012 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by DraftKings. Thanks for tuning in. Football season starts this week, and there's no better way to lock in your fantasy dominance than with Best Ball on DraftKings, where you draft once and ride your roster all season long. And right now, DraftKings is giving all customers a can't-miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20. You'll score another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million, giving you a second shot to win big. It's easy. Just draft your dream team once, no weekly management required, and let your top scorers automatically start each week. Across the whole season, every breakout star, every clutch play, every touchdown will count toward your quest for a share of $15 million. So download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft your $20 Best Ball lineup to play for a share of $15 million and get a second ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million. That's two chances to win big without ever setting your lineup again. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available from problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. One per customer. Enter the Best Ball $15 million headliner contest by 9/4/25 to get one bonus entry. $20 entry fee required. Reward expires in 30 days. See terms at DraftKings.com/NFL-best-ball. Sponsored by DK. This 10 Trends episode is the shortest one that you'll listen to each week. I come prepared with 10 statistical nuggets that are either actionable or just informative. And hopefully, you walk away with a little better understanding of the fantasy football landscape. Since the season hasn't started, I'll be giving 10 trends this week that stem from previous seasons. So let's do it. The first trend is about the Green Bay Packers offense. Last season, they finished the year ranked 30th in pass rate. Fewer than 48% of their pass and rush attempts ended up being a pass, meaning they ran it more than they threw it. Under Matt LaFleur's lead for 5 seasons prior to last year, the Packers never had a pass rate below 54%. And in particular, their neutral script rate, which I define as plays run in the first 3 quarters of games when the score is within a 6-point margin, they've been 3rd, 13th, 5th, 18th, 14th, and then 32nd in neutral script ratio. I'm anticipating more passing for the Packers this year, which should help the whole offense in fantasy football. Even Josh Jacobs should be okay because he'll see an uptick in overall targets. It's an offense worth investing in. They've been top 10 in touchdowns per game in all but one season under LaFleur, and in that one season, they ranked 14th. Brian Thomas was a monster last year. If you read the late round prospect guide this offseason, then you saw just how good his year 2 score looked in that year 2 model. His yards per route run was elite, especially for a rookie. He saw a target on 25% of his routes run. And he did that all while mostly playing a perimeter role. Here's some more context of just how good Brian Thomas's rookie season was. He's one of just 3 rookie wide receivers who finished that first year with at least a 20% target share per game rate and averaged up to target over 11 yards. Thomas's was at 11.9, and a yards after the catch per reception above 6. And this is since 2011. So they were getting down the field, but still doing a good bit of work after the catch, and they were seeing a lot of volume. The other 2 wide receivers who hit these marks, Jamar Chase and Julio Jones. I talked about Chris Rodriguez on yesterday's 15 Transactions episode, and I briefly mentioned how I do have Jacory Croskey-Merritt as the top running back in that backfield. Now that's largely due to ambiguity. We've gotten a sample of Rodriguez in the NFL, and Austin Eckler, while a value in drafts, he's 30 years old. I'd want to throw that dart at the young unknown asset. With that being said, Bill Croskey-Merritt, he's definitely a unique prospect. The ZAP model database includes all running backs who were either drafted or at the NFL Combine since 2011. Sometimes, like Jacory Croskey-Merritt, you get players who are drafted but not at the Combine. In that database, only 21 running backs were entering the NFL past their 24th birthday. Now, we've gotten more of them in recent years due to the pandemic and due to transfer rules. But the only player in that group who's given us a PPR point per game season above 12 is Andre Ellington, and he did it once. Now, again, like I said, we've gotten more and more of these types of players, these older prospects. Tyrone Tracy, RJ Harvey, Ray Davis, Woody Marks, players that I genuinely like a lot. And the model even likes them a lot too, despite their age. The interesting part with Croskey-Merritt, though, is that he also had a worse breakout score than those other guys did. Breakout score is determined by age and schedule-adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt. And Croskey-Merritt's is just 27.6. That's out of 100. Tyrone Tracy was at 98 because he played wide receiver in college. RJ Harvey was over 50. Woody Marks, about 79. Andre Ellington is the only player in this subset who also didn't have a great breakout score. Now, the good news for Croskey-Merritt is that a lot of his more secondary numbers that the model doesn't include, they look pretty good. His explosive run rate is good. His yards after contact per attempt is elite. If those numbers weren't good, I'd be out. But with day 3 picks, like I've said all summer and like I said in the newsletter, we often just need an ambiguous backfield. And that's what we have with Washington and with Croskey-Merritt, which is why he can still be targeted. Just don't be shocked if this goes south, because he'll need to be somewhat of an outlier to be a fantasy football stud. This is all why I've kind of just been at market with him rather than well above it. Now, I know Jakobi Meyers is wanting a new contract. There's a lot of stuff going on off the field, but I found this next trend really interesting. I have an average draft position database that goes back to 2014. I use that historical data to see the number of points we'd expect a player to score at a certain ADP. So if he's a 50th overall pick and he plays wide receiver, he'd be expected based on history to score X number of points per game. Jakobi Meyers has now been drafted for 4 seasons, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. I guess 5 if you count this year. He outplayed his average draft position expectation by 0.5 PPR points per game in 2021. In 2022, though, he outplayed expectation by 4.6 points per game. In 2023, he did it again by 4.5 points per game. And then last year, it was by 5.7 points per game. Now, he's never given us a monster ceiling, but Jakobi Meyers has been really undervalued by the market now basically every single year that he's been relevant in fantasy football. We'll see what happens here in 2025. We saw a running back renaissance last year, and while I do think a lot of that in fantasy football had to do with the health of running backs, and I talked about that at the start of the offseason on episode 966, we also have to recognize an NFL-wide macro trend. Pass rates are decreasing. From 2011 to 2020, the average pass rate was around 56.7%. That's on pass and rush attempts. Over the last 4 years, that's progressively gotten lower. It's gone from 56.3% in 2021 to 55% in 2022 to 55.6% in 2023, but then last year, it was 54.8%. That was by far the lowest pass rate of any season since at least 2011. It's going to be interesting to see if offenses still operate the same way here in 2025. It's definitely something to keep in mind and to watch. Now, I wasn't really in or out on Mike Evans this year, but one thing is clear when you watch his 2024 season and you look at the underlying metrics. He's still really good at football. Evans finished last year with a yards per route run rate of 2.41. That was actually the best rate of his entire career. He saw a target on 26% of his routes run. Only 2 wide receivers had a better yards per route run rate in year 10 or later of their NFL career since 2011. Anquan Boldin in 2013, that was year 11 for him, and then Andre Johnson in 2012, which was year 10. In 2014, the following year, Anquan Boldin finished as the wide receiver 23 in PPR points per game. He dropped from wide receiver 16. So he was still plenty usable, though we did see a dip in production. Andre Johnson from 2012 to 2013 went from the wide receiver 5 to the wide receiver 10. So Evans has already proven to be an outlier. I wouldn't count him out just yet. The Browns' backfield is just one giant question mark right now. You've got Jerome Ford, who's been there, and then there's Dylan Sampson. They recently added one of my pre-draft favorites in Rocket Sanders. But there's optimism right now surrounding Quinshon Judkins finally signing his contract. The one thing that's been stuck in my mind is the fact that Cleveland's not going to be very good this year. They'll likely face a lot of negative game scripts. And the player who led them in long down and distance snaps and 2-minute snaps last year, according to Fantasy Life data, was Jerome Ford. The player in second on that team was Pierre Strong. Strong is no longer a Cleveland Brown. Both Judkins and Sampson don't have like unbelievable pass catching profiles according to the ZAP model. And they're also rookies. In turn, I ended up drafting a decent amount of Ford late in best ball drafts this summer as a cheap PPR option. But I'm going to be very interested to see how they deploy him if and when those negative game scripts hit. He might end up being a very easy to acquire option in PPR formats, though I do still prefer Dylan Sampson as the upside option. When you look at the wide receivers who ranked in the top 10 last year in air yard share, you get only top 30 wide receivers by ADP. A.J. Brown, Malik Neighbors, Cortland Sutton, Calvin Ridley, George Pickens, Marvin Harrison, DK Metcalf, Mike Evans, and Terry McLaurin. Except for one player, Rasheed Shaheed. Shaheed was added as a late round dart throw to the late round draft guide because he's seemingly healthy, and he's just a really underrated player. He had a 22.5% target share per game rate through 6 games last year. His yards per route run was over 2 yards, and he averaged almost 13 PPR points per game. Now, people may be down on him because of the situation in New Orleans, but at least we've got Kellen Moore coaching that team now. And during his 5 seasons as an offensive coordinator, his teams never finished with fewer than 65 plays per game. They play at a fast pace. The average plays per game last year in the NFL was 62.2. Moore is well above that as his baseline. I think Shaheed could finish as a wide receiver 3 this year. He's been a value in drafts. R squared essentially tells us how well one thing explains another thing. As I say in the late round draft guide, it's almost like how much credit should we give this variable score? An R squared of 1 or 100% means there's flawless correlation. An R squared of 0 means that there's none. Dating back to 2014, and this is a chart in the late round draft guide too, but dating back to 2014, I've looked at how well average draft position explains points per game at each position in fantasy football. And with quarterbacks, we've seen quite a shift over the last 5 years, largely thanks to the predictability of rushing. But from 2014 to 2019, when looking at top 24 quarterbacks by ADP, we had R squared values of 24%, 0%, 29%, 5%, 11%, and 2%. That's looking at top 24 quarterbacks by ADP versus actual points per game scored. Over the last 5 years, though, those numbers have jumped to 47%, 55%, 35%, 27%, and 24%. That's because the same quarterbacks are giving us high-end output. That wasn't always the case in fantasy football. So I'm bringing this up because number 1, it's a trend. Quarterback has gotten more predictable. But number 2, the position is really deep this year. And I'm really curious to see what the R squared value is going to look like at the end of the season. The last trend this week is another one straight from the draft guide. Since 2014, among top 18 running backs by ADP, previous season receiving points per game has been pretty predictive. In fact, when you remove Derrick Henry from the data set because he's such a freaking anomaly of a human being, we've had 13 running backs drafted in the top 18 at the position with a previous season receiving points per game. So PPR points on receptions only. 13 running backs with receiving points per game of 0 to 3. None of those players outpaced their average draft position expectation by even 2 points per game. Every other subset, 3 to 5 receiving points in the previous season, 5 to 7 points, and 7 or more points, each one of those subsets outplayed expectation by 2 or more points per game by at least a 29% rate. Now, I don't want to ever bet against Jonathan Taylor, so I didn't even do that this year, even if I was slightly underweight. But last year, Taylor was at 2.7 receiving points per game. That's just something to think about. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll talk to you tomorrow with the Weekly Sleeper Show.